Welcome to Hoop City with Paul Sir. This is the deep dive. I'm so happy to be welcoming back Ben Golliver. Ben, it was great seeing you in your stomping grounds in Southern California a couple of weeks ago, and it's great to have you on the show again.
It's good to be back, and I'm surprised we didn't keep you down here. You know, sometimes people come to California and they never leave. I don't know if you got tempted like that.
We did. Yeah, I think you always do. You go, really? We're leaving this? And when we landed, it was more like, really? This is what we're coming back to? Because we came back to cold and snow. But hey, we all know home's where the heart is.
Oh, yeah.
And, at least we have to keep telling ourselves that. So before we go into the last weekend of the NBA, I would like to do a little bit on the end of March Madness with your Michigan Wolverines winning for the first time since 1989. Dominant performance, although you have to give UConn a lot of credit in the final game. And then UCLA winning their first women's championship ever, I guess, because the last time they won was in 1978 when it wasn't the NCAA championship. It was something totally different. So a huge victory for the Bruins. And I'd like to start with the Bruins because it's a team that from a watchability standpoint was a real easy team, not just to watch, but to like. I felt, whether it was from the enthusiasm of their really great coach, Corey Close on the sideline, but their style of play, the type of players that they had, that was a great championship team, I thought, Ben.
Well, it was a very satisfying run. You know, I covered them at last year's March Madness, and I thought they were going to do it last year, and they actually got to the Final Four and just took a horrible loss. I mean, it was a complete blowout. They weren't competitive. They were shell-shocked. And it was one of those moments where you wonder how a team and a coach will respond when they've never done it, like you've described. I mean, Corey Close has been at it for a long time. Her players this year were like all seniors, pretty much all the key players. And they just did the classic, like, well, you get punched in the mouth, get yourself back up, and we're going to come back and do it again. This year, UConn wasn't as good as the previous year. They didn't actually get UConn, and they shot at a revenge because the bracket broke a little bit differently. But boy, did they take care of business. I really put a lot of it on Lauren Betts. As fun as they are to watch on offense, because they move the ball, they share the ball, and they involve her, which is always fun because, the entry pass, it's a lost art in a lot of basketball. And UCLA is not afraid to throw those entry passes. But I thought it was just her defensive presence that just shut everything down. She's not as mobile as like the NBA version of a Wembanyama or a Chet, or, these high level, bigs that just patrol the paint. But she was so big, so good at the defensive rebounding, and then so disciplined, play to play, doesn't take plays off, that South Carolina just couldn't figure out what to do. I mean, their offense was basically incompetent. They're barely scoring. And I'm not saying that to bash South Carolina. I'm just saying that is the kind of impact that a huge player who's great at blocking shots, great at rebounding, and great at stepping out and switching when necessary can have on a game. And so I thought they won the championship with defense. Of course, Jaquez had a major starring role with all of her energy. And, Kiki Rice is a great player. I mean, just go down the list. They have a lot of people who contributed, but it was a true team that stuck together after a very difficult loss the previous year. And, it was cool to see them get a lot of recognition here in LA. They actually had a moment at the Lakers game to celebrate them. And then the very next night, they had a moment at the Clippers game to celebrate them. And so they were the toast of the town here, bringing a championship home. And of course, Corey Close, we gave a lot of the credit to her mentor, John Wooden, which is always nice to see that lineage as well.
Well, it really is. And I thought the stories that came out talking about her experiences with Coach Wooden and her being able to be influenced by and mentored somewhat by Wooden, but certainly impacted by him. And it's really a shame that Wooden's era is so far in the past, Ben, because his coaching style, his philosophy, not just his success, not his gaudy record in the record books, but I think he is still to this day the beacon of coaching. At the ultimate height, because his thoroughness and his thoughtfulness of how he coached kids his hierarchies, the values that he placed into his program. That is as legendary. And I think when you listened to people like the late, great Bill Walton, but even Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and just the reverential respect they had for Wooden, to have that impact Corey. And what stood out with her remarks to me the most, Ben, was how she said that it validated her thought that she could care about the players and still be an effective coach. What are your thoughts? You live in LA, You're so familiar with John Wooden and all that he's about, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you go to Pauley Pavilion, it's incredible how many banners they've got up from the Wooden era, and
Absolutely.
Obviously it's been a distinguished program since then too. But I mean, if you really want to take it in, you go see the statues, you go see the championship banners, you go see the long list of retired jerseys that pretty much all belong to Hall of Fame players who went on to great success. That's what they talk about when they say legacy, right? Is, changing people's lives, making them better players, making them better humans, and then having them go on well after they've played for you, the huge success. And that's really what happened with the Wooden UCLA teams. Corey Close is going to have the same thing. I mean, a bunch of these players are going to go really high in the WNBA draft, including Lauren Betts, who could be the number one pick. We'll see exactly how that shakes out. But she has taken, it's hilarious. I mean, she quotes Wooden like some preachers quote the Bible or scripture. It's like every interview, it's John told me this, Coach Wooden said this, it's clear that this was way past the normal mentor-mentee relationship. That, is just a very, very deep bond, and that she subscribes to all the same philosophies that he did. He was always about being a well-rounded person and being a good person. He talked a lot about humility. He talked a lot about balance. He didn't want people to rush, don't hurry. All those kinds of lessons are on and off the court from John Wooden. And I think Corey Close brought that to her team. You heard her mention, well, I have my players journaling, or I have my players doing positive affirmations after a practice about this is what went well. And you look at her best player, Lauren Betts, who described some very serious mental health battles and challenges along the way where, she wasn't happy at Stanford. She really felt like she lost her way. And so much of UCLA's success was Corey Close trying to find the right way to help Lauren Betts be happy as a person, be comfortable, be satisfied, and be able to, kind of achieve her best on the court. And so I do think the mental side was what really stood out. And, frankly, they got smacked last year. A lot of teams would break. A lot of coaches would question everything that they're doing and like go back to square one. And I think because she had that Wooden foundation, she didn't do it. She said, hey, let's go back and take another shot. We could do this thing. And they actually got it done. And in some cases, they weren't challenged all that much. I mean, they really took care of business in a lot of their toughest games this year.
They really did. Three quick thoughts. Number one, I love the way Lauren Betts ran the court. That is the sign of a happy post player. When you run the court both directions as hard as she did, the dead sprint, she would run rim to rim. That's every coach's dream. Every coach worth their weight in salt always talks about running the court, sprinting the court. Bigs, run the court, and if they do, if you've got the ball, reward them for their efforts. UCLA did that extremely well. Secondly, about going to Pauley Pavilion, I'm with you. But you also have to go into the Hall of Fame and see Johnny Wooden's office, humble office, the way they have recreated it, like created it from Wooden's own items, and then the historical, the trophies, etc. It's just, it really is another one of those religious experiences if you're really into the sport of basketball. But then the third thing I loved was, I remember back into the 90s when the Runnin' Rebs absolutely blasted Duke out of the water one year, and next year Duke came back and beat them. It really reminded me of that. And that was kind of the benchmark I was thinking going into the Final Four is what team was UCLA going to be? Were they going to be Duke, or were they going to be, as you described, as a lot of other teams that get broken or have their confidence shaken at their foundation? They certainly Corey and her approach to the game built on that foundation, use that as a learning experience. And you see that so often. Until you get there, until you taste it, you don't know what the experience is. But not that many teams rebound that way and come back stronger the way UCLA did.
No, I mean, you're sparking thoughts for me on all those points. I mean, number one, we love bigs who run the court because think about how hard it is to defend Lauren Betts when you have your defense set in the half court. She's just so big. She's got the drop step moves. And now if you get her moving and you don't necessarily have the right matchup, now her defender has to run with her, and maybe she doesn't want to do that. It's much harder to run on defense than it is to run on offense, right? And your defense isn't set. Well, it's just going to be a layup. I mean, that's just, or in the NBA, it's going to be a dunk, right? And that's why you want the bigs to move so much. It's so hard to get those matchups in transition against big players. How many alley-oop dunks does Wemby get over the course of a season if he's moving up and down the court? I mean, it's just it's easy stuff, right? In terms of what enshrines the Indiana basketball high school Hall of Fame, I would recommend that to people not too far outside of Indianapolis. That's where Coach Wooden was from. I actually went to his small hometown in the middle of nowhere. You wouldn't know it from anything else, right? Except they do have a lot of wooden signs up. But in Newcastle, they've got a lot of his memorabilia from his high school years. He was quite a player himself, and of course, he worked up the ranks as a coach in Indiana as well. So if you want the early John Wooden stuff, that's where you should go. I just think their resilience as a team was excellent. And part of their success, I would credit to them joining the Big Ten. Now, there's been a lot of tension in different sports about, these West Coast teams. Should they join the Big Ten? It's so much travel. It screws everything up. And, in football, maybe some of these teams aren't competitive and it wasn't really the best idea. But by UCLA joining the Big Ten, they got test after test after test after test this year, and they smoked everybody. I mean, they really took care of business in the conference play. We know the Big Ten produced Caitlin Clark in Iowa. We know Michigan's got a great women's program that's been developing. I mean, you just go right down the list. Indiana, they've had some success recently. I mean, all these different teams are going to test you, and you're going to have to go on the road and beat them. And so I felt like by the time UCLA got to the tournament, they were so ready and so prepared. And I would just point out, it's rare that a Big Ten team wins it all. Iowa went 0 for 2, and that was a little sad to see. But the Big Ten took it in both men's basketball and women's basketball this year.
Well, for those of us who are Big Ten fans, it was a great year. It was fantastic to see. And let's jump over to the other Big Ten champion, the Michigan Wolverines. It means an awful lot to you and your family that this happened. One of the a couple of observations I have. I love that you made the point about UCLA feeding the post in the traditional way, the interior post pass. Like you said, that along with the mid-range jump shot, which is on a bit of a comeback trail, but those are lost art forms that I think are silly that they are. But I saw that a lot in the men's side of things because and it's a whole different discussion when you talk about possible rule changes down the road. But so many men's teams try to eat up the first 15 seconds of the shot clock with their dribble weave out front before they start going into any of their actions. And one of the actions that even as massive as Michigan is, that was still not exploited even to the ability that they could exploit it to, was the interior post passing. They did have some great high-low passes, some great back seals in the lane. It was more of what I would call a traditional post game, but it still surprises me. That's number one. The second surprise I had, because the final game was a bit of a rock fight. I mean, that was haymakers being thrown with blindfolds on.
Michigan couldn't hit a shot. And I mean, it was maybe their worst shooting game of the entire year in the championship game. I mean, that's the nightmare scenario, right?
It really was. And the other thing that threw me a bit from a technical side, Ben, is the spacing. I was shocked at how both teams, UConn too, because I've genuinely regarded as UConn being the gold standard of running effective actions away from the ball. Lots of screens, lots of picks, lots of slips. But I found both teams bunching up on one side, lower, like inside, close to her inside. I looked like in 1980s NBA basketball, close to her inside the 3-point line. That really surprised me. But do you think that that contributed? And I know I'm in the weeds on it, but I think that contributed to the low shooting percentages because they didn't space the court well to give a lot of shooters a bit of time to make the choice to catch and shoot or to lift fake and shoot because everybody was so clustered together.
Well, so Michigan's strategy this season was we're going to be bigger than you. We're going to bully you. So
Yes.
they bring in a whole bunch of guys who are upperclassmen, right, through the transfer portal. They get a Diamara, they get Merez Johnson, this kind of beefy power forward. A Diamara is 7'3" center. They get Yaxel Lendenberg,
Your
who is
UCLA
this.
guy, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. And Lendenberg comes in as sort of their best all-around player on both sides, but he's also really big. And they're kind of playing these jumbo lineups where they're playing him at the 3, where at times last year he played center. And so when you have that much size, and it's relatively good, versatile size too, it
Yes.
is going to create those clogged log jams that you're talking about. Now, when they went against Arizona in the Final Four, Arizona's whole thing was their winning strategy all year long was we're going to be bigger than you. We're going to score at the rim, and you're not going to be able to
We're
stop
going
us.
to beat you up. We're going to
Right.
beat you into submission inside.
But it went the other way in the Final Four,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like it
Yeah.
was bigs on bigs, and Michigan proved to be bigger, and that's how they were able to win that game. So when they go against UConn's not nearly as big as Arizona was. I think Michigan's strategy was, well, we feel very confident we're going to own the paint. And so what we're going to do is try to challenge every three-point shot that goes up as best we possibly can. We're not going to be double and tripling team guys in the post. We're going to be, trying to recover like crazy and challenge every shot, force those three-pointers out, and just try to make them more difficult shots. And that defensive game plan really worked. And you kept hearing on the broadcast, the guys were saying, well, UConn is playing the style of play that they want. The game is slower. Michigan prefers to play fast up and down. But the thing was, Michigan had a better defense all season. And so the fact that it turned into a rock fight, you might call that UConn style because the game was a little bit slower, but Michigan was very comfortable playing that way because they were such a complete team. They could beat Arizona playing big. They could beat UConn playing slow. And it didn't really matter because they were sort of the most well-rounded team that we really saw all season long, with the possible exception of Duke. Duke was also very well-rounded, but of course they tripped up blowing the lead against UConn, so we didn't get that big showdown. And so I think that's the sign of a very good team, also a very well-coached team. The other thing that stood out to me about the championship game, when nothing is going in, it's so easy to get discouraged. It's so easy to get down on yourself. You even saw the halftime interview where Yaxel Lendenberg is being asked about how he's playing. He's like, I'm horrible. I'm playing soft. I can't do anything.
One of the great interviews I've heard. One of the most honest, great interviews I've heard in a long time.
Right. And he was honest to a fault. You're saying, hey, man, pick your head up. Like, you guys are leading and, you're halfway home to a championship. Right. But that was the frustration level. I mean, he was injured, and I think that was contributing to maybe some of his struggles as well. But that's why I thought it was great coaching from Dusty May down the stretch. The UConn kid from Indiana, Mullins, hits 2 3-pointers. Immediately, Dusty May has the defensive, adjustment to put in a different player to guard him. Yaxel Lendenberg, throws up 2 jumpers because he starts to get tired midway through that second half. Immediately, Dusty May pulls him out and gives him a break. And even down the stretch, Duke had faltered against UConn with some of the inbounds and the turnovers. They didn't take a timeout. Michigan started to have some of the same problems, and UConn banks in a 3-pointer to cut the lead to 4 late. Dusty uses the timeouts, gets his guys organized, makes sure they get to the free throw line. A guy actually misses both free throws. There's crazy scramble situations, and yet they're still poised enough, even despite all this mounting chaos, to be able to bring the win home at the end. McKinney hits the huge 3, which felt like the dagger, and then they were able to just get the stops that they needed and kind of squeeze out UConn's offense in the last minute or two. So I thought it was just a very well-managed game by Dusty. So many things going wrong, so many opportunities to lose your head. He never lost his head. He kept his composure, and his players followed along right behind him.
Let's jump over to the NBA, Ben, because we've got the last weekend of games. There's still some positioning that's remaining to be worked out. And it's particularly, I think, in the Eastern Conference, where the most movement could still happen in the last couple of games. But before we jump into that, we usually touch on the Lakers, and we've gone from, talk about peaks and valleys and soaring high and falling far, but they definitely have fallen far thanks to the injury bug. Again, when things were really cooking for them, when they were really going great, playing at the best they were. Luka was playing probably as well as he's ever played in his career. Then the same night, he and Reeves go out. And
Yeah.
now they're looking at the playoffs with a whole different lens, and it ain't a pretty sight.
Well, I mean, it's tough to see, and I know that
Yes.
everybody got their hopes up, and the chemistry around this team to me was the best we've seen from a Lakers team in 5 years. I mean, they
Yeah.
had pretty good chemistry the year after they won the bubble championship. They came back and they were quite good, and guys were all on the same page and they were rolling. But since then, there's been a lot of ups and downs and drama, and Russell Westbrook's here, and now he's gone, and D'Angelo Russell, and like all the just kind of seasons that got away from the team for basketball reasons, for personality reasons, for the kinds of stuff that you would hope that you would be able to control, and they just haven't really been able to take care of it. This year, they finally did. Everybody's aligned. LeBron's buying into the third role. Austin Reeves is taking a jump. Luka's playing like an MVP candidate. It's all lined up. JJ's, got another 50-win season under his belt. And then kapoof, it all just goes away overnight. And, of course, it's because Luka got injured and also secondarily because Reeves got injured. Horrible breaks for them. And so they were on track potentially to be the 3 seed in the Western Conference. And that, puts them in position. Well, maybe they could get to the Western Conference Finals before they have to face Oklahoma City. Now they can't even look ahead at all. Now they're looking at the possibility of a 4 or 5 matchup against Houston. Houston, I think it would be heavily favored in that matchup over the Lakers without their 2 stars. There's just no good way to replace 60 to 65 to 70 points per game between Luka and Reeves. You just can't do it. And so now they're looking at the possibility of a very quick first-round exit and potentially starting that series on the road where you're coming back home down 2-0, and that's a really tough spot to be in if that's how it shakes out. So, I mean, yeah, they went from dreaming of the Western Conference Finals and maybe if everything breaks right, Luka can outduel the Thunder, like that's the dream, right? To now their season could be over in about 2 weeks. And, you have all the questions. Do you bring LeBron back? How do you, refashion the roster? How much is Reeves going to make as a free agent this summer? I mean, you start asking all these kinds of questions, and they never even got the fun of a real playoff run. So it's just very demoralizing here in Los Angeles. There's no other way to put it. And you can even feel it at the game earlier this week. I mean, they played the Thunder. LeBron sat out. The 2 stars were injured. They were down 40 at one point, and they're starting Drew Timme, Gonzaga legend, somehow getting himself into the starting lineup. And it just didn't feel real. I mean, it felt like summer league kind of. It just didn't even feel like a real game. And just a week or two before that, they had been running the Cavaliers off the court, and everything was going great. So it turned so fast, and I feel bad for everybody involved.
I do too. And it has been the source of a lot of controversy. It being the Lakers have been the source of a lot of controversy. But questions were being not only answered, expectations were being met and exceeded as we were getting on into the season. LeBron, after he came back from sitting out for a while, blended in as well as I think anybody could have ever expected him. Luka was unreal. Austin was rock solid. Ayton, people were even saying, Ayton's not so bad. Like he's doing some good things. Like when was the last time you heard that about by Ayton? So yeah, it is a shame. But now we have to look at the landscape. The Thunder are phenomenal, just playing phenomenal basketball, as are the Spurs, as are the Nuggets. My gosh, those top 3 in the West, the way they're going into the playoffs, that sets up just an amazing Western Conference battle with the Thunder being favored, and I would probably go so far as to say somewhat heavily favored to come out of it and to repeat as champions. But now you've got Jokic just playing unbelievably well, and the Spurs have not taken their foot off the gas. They just get better and better as a team, as does Wemby. And now for the first time we have the Wemby factor in the playoffs, barring injury, in full bloom. That changes a lot of things and creates the possibility where people can now start saying, maybe it'll be a little more interesting than just the Thunder rolling through.
Well, yeah, I definitely think that the Spurs are the must-watch team of these playoffs. I can't wait to see how Wemby plays, how they perform. But I would say the Thunder are huge beneficiaries of the Lakers' woes because they were looking at the possibility if the Lakers were the 3 seed, Denver probably would have been the 4 seed, and now Oklahoma City would have to face Denver in the second round if that's how it had shaken out. Instead, what's most likely going to happen is the Lakers are going to drop into that 4-5 matchup with Houston. Oklahoma City will have a cakewalk in the first round. They'll probably get Houston in the second round. Houston just is not a good team in the clutch, and they're not a particularly good matchup for Oklahoma City. I would expect Oklahoma City to take care of Houston quite easily in the second round. So instead of having to get Denver in that second round, now they're getting Houston. So you'd way rather have that if you're the Thunder. And then you put on top of it, if the good teams all advance. So I'm saying if San Antonio and Denver take care of business, they'll have to play in the second round, and that's going to be an absolute bloodbath, a war. And meanwhile, Oklahoma City is sitting over here saying, okay, well, we get to take care of Houston while these two guys beat each other up, and we only have to face one of them, right? Well, if you're Oklahoma City and you're getting not buys, but you're getting two, pretty quick rounds, and you're getting to rest up and concentrate all your resources on who are you going to play in the Western Conference Finals, it's a huge advantage. And so I'm not saying it's impossible for Denver or San Antonio to make it through to the finals, but it's going to be a lot tougher. Their path is a lot trickier than it will be for Oklahoma City. But Denver's been playing great basketball. I think 10 straight wins. I mean, they've really turned it on when they've needed to. And one of those wins was a big overtime victory over the Spurs in one of the best games we've seen all season.
Absolutely.
But the Spurs are holding down their end of the bargain too. They're going to have the 2 seed. They're going to have home court advantage. They've got great chemistry and momentum as well. So, it feels like a collision course between Denver and San Antonio, and then another one between whoever wins that series and Oklahoma City. But the untimely injuries for the Lakers, to me, it just shook up the whole deck, and it really cleared a path for Oklahoma City to potentially repeat. I did get a chance to see them this week. Holy cow. I mean, it was probably a B or C effort by their standards because they really weren't pushed. They didn't have to play Jalen Williams. The Lakers were kind of in tatters like I described, but boy, the defense is still clicking at a high level. Shea looked unstoppable. Wasn't even his best game, but still just so relentless in terms of how he scores. He makes it look so easy. Chet Holmgren's been coming on lately, playing some really good basketball as well, which is a positive sign. I feel better than ever, honestly, that OKC is going to be able to go back to back. And it's so hard to do that in this modern NBA, but I think it's setting up quite well for them.
I think it is too. And what I love about it, though, is the only thing standing in their way are these two X factors named Wemby and Jokic. Yeah. And San Antonio, of course, had their early season success. You can't really transfer that forward to now. Because we know it's a marathon, not a sprint, and lots has changed. But the one thing San Antonio does do, and definitely better than Denver, but better than anybody else in the NBA, is they do match up better against OKC than anybody else. They have some unique matchups that can bother, not stop, but can bother them. There's nobody that can stop SGA right now. Like you can have like as good as San Antonio is, he's just on a whole different level than everybody. And he's got too many weapons in the quiver to be stopped. It would seem, but it does make at least there's some possibility of a drama in the Western Conference, and it's not just going to be, and it still could be, but it's not just going to be a steamroller job by OKC. So Ben, on the East, we'll wrap up with that. You've got Detroit. I didn't look today before we talked. What's the latest on Cade Cunningham's health?
Well, so he came back, kind of surprising some people. He played limited minutes, but he did play this week, and he was really looking to move the ball around. I think he had 10 assists in like 25 minutes, and so it wasn't, I'm trying to come back and score 35 and get everybody excited. So he's back. Obviously, I think there's a boost from a basketball standpoint, but also just from a mental standpoint, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're going into the playoffs feeling like, hey, we are the 1 seed. You got that swagger if you're the Pistons. And, I expect whoever they play, and we don't know who it's going to be. We'll come down to the final day of the season, but whoever they play is going to try to test Cade. That would be my number one game plan thing is, hey, this guy's collapsed lung, whatever they're calling it, you got to rough him up, and you're not going to cross the line, of course, but you got to test him physically to see what is he capable of doing. And so whoever they play,
know how awful that sounds to say the guy has a collapsed lung. We got to rough him up.
Hey,
I'm just joking. It's not like he's got a bum knee. It's like he had a collapsed lung.
I mean, it's a heroic for him to get back on the court. And,
Yes.
we've seen sometimes with these, it is an injury that maybe sometimes sounds worse than it is. I think you
Yes.
can wear a protective thing on your chest.
Yes.
We saw CJ McCollum come back from it in a couple of weeks. But, this is the NBA playoffs. We know how coaches are. You're going to be getting picked. I'm running through him through 15 different screens, right? You're going to try
Absolutely.
to punish him a little bit. And so he's a tough guy. I mean, clearly he's back on the court and he's so talented. And so it's great to see this number one seed kind of closer to full strength, going into the playoffs. And now it raises the question, okay, well, a lot of people have been saying Boston's the favorite, because they've got Tatum back and, they've got the experience. They've got a lot of guys, if Derek White or Jaylen Brown, two-way players who have done it at a very, very high level. But this year's body of work says Detroit's been better, right? So who's the real favorite, and New York wants to be into the party too. So you were saying earlier, you've got a couple of interesting foils for the number one seed in the Western Conference. I think we have the exact same dynamic shaping up in the East, right?
Agreed. Totally agree. And I think that this is one of the more intriguing playoff beginnings in the Eastern Conference in a long, long time. How long has it been since all 10 Eastern Conference teams will have records over 500?
Right.
It used to be you get like to 6 and the rest were all below 500. Now everybody's over 500, and in the West, the bottom 2 are going to be below 5. Well, yeah, I think the bottom 2 are Golden State. Yeah, they're below 500. So it's great to see the Eastern Conference strengthening up. So I've got, and I know your time, you've been so generous with it, but I've got to run a couple of questions by you. If you had to pick today between Coach of the Year, I'll just give you 2 candidates, Bickerstaff and Mazzulla, who would you pick?
I'm on Mazzulla, and it's mostly because the health factor. I just think with Detroit, until the Cade injury late in the season, they had such great availability. They just got into one of those joyride years where everything was easy. I don't think everything was easy for Boston. I mean, when you're trying to pick up the pieces after Tatum, but not just Tatum being injured, losing Horford, losing Kornet, you go right down the list. They had a lot of key rotation players departing. And so they had to reshape their identity on the fly. They became younger. They became deeper. They became, I think, a tougher team, a little bit more of a, maybe tougher is the wrong word because they're not as big, but just a gutsier team. They just playing hard, trying to run you off the court, trying to exhaust you a little bit, a little bit more like the Pacers who won the East last year. Right. They just sort of changed their identity, and it worked, and I think a lot of it is how Mazzulla wants to play. Great relationship with Jaylen Brown, was able to kind of empower him. Derek White just rock solid. He steps up. Peyton Pritchard's getting some starting looks at times this season. He has a great season. It just felt like he really maximized what his team was able to do while juggling a lot of strife. The things that were outside of his control, players departing, Tatum being injured, Tatum needing to be worked back in mid-season. I think they've handled it very well. So even though Detroit has been a great overachieving team, not taking anything away from them at all, Boston actually surprised me more with their success this season. I thought they were going to be a team, down there in the play-in, 9 or 10, right, not fighting for the number one seed and landing at number 2. I just didn't see that coming. So, that's why I went with Mazzulla, but it's an all-time, close battle for sure.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you summed it up. I mean, when you're dealing with splitting hairs to get to that conclusion, that means you have some great coaching going on, because you can go beyond those 2 as well and look at a number of other coaches that have done an absolutely phenomenal job. Okay, real quickly, awards, most improved player.
So I'm going Jalen Duren with the Detroit Pistons. I think what put me over the top was when Cade went out, he raised his game and they kept winning, right? Yep. I usually think of a player like Jalen Duren as being derivative because so much of his offense is being created for him. But the fact that he's a great, backline defender for them, great rim protector, shown some, growth offensively in terms of, being a willing passer and also being able to score even without Cade setting him up. And also just to break out in terms of making his first All-Star game and being a player who's going to be someone who, I mean, he didn't even get a contract extension last summer. Detroit, they were even, I think, surprised by his level of improvement this year. Otherwise, they would have paid him last year when it was cheaper because now the price just went up. So
They did.
to me, I love rewarding winning. I love rewarding guys who contribute directly to winning, and that's Jalen Duren. I mean, you got some good candidates, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jalen Johnson for Atlanta. It's just tougher to be the 1 seed than it is to be the 5 or 6 seed. And so that's why I'm going Jalen Duren.
I think it's a great choice. It's a solid choice. I would love, I'm a big Alexander Walker fan. I think the Timberwolves made a huge mistake not paying him because a lot of the problems that they've had would have been solved if they kept him. And if Finch had done a more insightful job of how to play him, I think, players get pigeonholed no matter how good you are as a coach. When you're coaching, you start pigeonholing players and saying, this is what they're capable of, and you put them in that box. And I really felt Nickeil had that problem in Minnesota where he went to Atlanta, and out of necessity or out of design, they let him go. And boy, has he ever exploded in terms of his improvement this year and made a big difference on the improving Hawks as well, who have some talent and are trying to do some good things down there. Defensive Player of the Year. Gee, this is a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you know who it's going to be. It's Wemby.
Yeah, of course.
He's got the statistical argument. He's ranked like first in all the major advanced stats for defense, but this is really just the eye test, right? I mean, when you start to see players running away from a guy, because they're like they're afraid of his arms. They
look oftentimes in the NBA for the first time in a long time. They look like junior high players. When they see the big guy and, all of a sudden there's a 6'5" grade 8 kid, 8th grader out there who's blocking everybody's shots. That's how NBA players react to him.
Yeah, I mean, U-turns are legal in the NBA. You're allowed to just, go towards the rim and then just, do a 180 and go back the other way. We see it a lot. And, it shows through. I mean, their defense was 25th last year because he missed a lot of time due to injury. They're all the way up to 3rd this year. He's leading the league in block shots. His numbers, they really haven't been done by anybody except for Shaq and David Robinson over the last 30 years. He's just in a class by himself. You don't have to overthink this one.
No.
Asar Thompson, great for Detroit. Chet Holmgren, great for Oklahoma City. But, there's one guy, and if he's healthy, he'll win the next 5, right? I mean, at least.
100%.
Yeah.
He's just a different deal. Okay, last 2. I'm going to start with I'm going to leave the hardest one for last. MVP.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And,
100%.
For me, I hopped on with him when they were 24-1 to start. And I felt like, anytime you don't have a championship hangover and you're like coming back better, that shows a lot to me about the character and the consistency of your leader. And he carried them through so many injuries, right? I think last year they set the NBA record for point differential. They were winning their games by an average of 12.8 points. This year, it's only 12.1 points, which is top 5 all time. So again, it just shows you the consistency. He breaks Wilt Chamberlain's record for the 20 points per game. They have the best record in the league again, the number 1 seed again. I don't know why I would have changed my mind since the 24-1. I know people made arguments for Wemby, arguments for Joker, arguments for even Luka there for a while, but ultimately he came up short on the games played. It just best player on best team with the consistency factor. He's mastered scoring. He's shooting 2-pointers more efficiently than prime Shaquille O'Neal or prime Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, Jabbar never missed his jump hook, and somehow Shai has better 2-point field goal percentage. Makes no sense.
Numbers, ludicrous.
Yeah.
Like these are, and what I love about the MVP, it's not a race, but it's a bar being raised to a higher level than I've ever seen in terms of 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Hoop City with Paul Sir and our birthday boy, Josh Fenwick. Happy birthday, Josh.
Thank you. 22 years young. Not to make you feel old or anything, Paul.
That you don't have to work very hard at that. I mean, there's only a half a century difference between us. So,
basically shared life experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But no, happy birthday, Josh. And
thanks.
Sounds like you got an exciting birthday coming up, going down watching the Flames on the weekend. So congratulations. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Enjoy and
I
celebrate.
absolutely will. In your honor, for sure.
Of
now
course.
that you've told me to have a good
sweet.
one.
You're such a sweet talker for your young age. So, okay, as we wrap things up here, let's touch on a couple of things. First of all, the Edmonton Stinger season is just around the corner. I think we're about 3 weeks away, just under 3 weeks away, I think. 3 weeks away from the Stingers starting up. They'll be playing the first game in the CEBL. We haven't talked a lot about the Stingers on the show this year because, quite honestly, we haven't had a lot to talk about. So far, the signings have been, it's nice to see a number of the players coming back from last year, particularly this last week, announcing that the Canadian University Player of the Year, Aaron Rooms, will be returning to the Stingers. And I know that Coach Baker and his staff will be looking to Aaron to play a more significant role. Nick Hornsby's back, of course, and then a number of other players, Tay Donald, Bossier, and it's great to have them back. So I'm looking forward to some more significant signings coming up so we get a chance to talk about the way the team is coming together. But folks, be aware of that. Of course, the Stingers will be playing down in the Expo Center, and the tickets are on sale right now. You can go to their website and check them out. And looking forward to what we hope to be a real good, competitive, and interesting CEBL season. Monday, Josh, WNBA draft. It all has accelerated rapidly with news surrounding the WNBA. Once everybody got their act together, got the collective bargaining agreement signed, that's great. You've got Caitlin Clark back in the fold, Indiana Fever signing new players. They just signed Kelsey Mitchell to a one-year deal. Now, one of the things that's interesting, and it almost reminds me, Josh, of the NCAA, is their way that their rosters are being put together this year is very last minute. And you have a flurry of free agent signings taking place right now. And I know a lot of that was due to the collective bargaining agreement because you didn't know salary cap, you didn't know pay scales, any of that. So players that were in advance have been waiting for this. So now you've got a flurry going on, including our own Canadian entry into the WNBA. The Toronto Tempo, they have been making some nice signings, and they just also opened up a beautiful new training facility, but they've signed Julie Alaman. They've got Brittany Sykes, Marina Mabry from the Phoenix franchise. So the one thing about the WNBA, and Oakland proved this past year, you do not have to go through a long building phase necessarily to be competitive in the WNBA because of the availability of players. And on Monday, we're going to see some of the great players that were just in the NCAA being drafted as well. Really looking forward to seeing if Lauren Betts goes as the number one pick. I'm pulling for her that she is that pick. Such a class act, such a great player, such a great career, and now a national champion. So WNBA coming up, and of course, Josh, the NBA playoffs. Now, here's my final question to you, Josh. If you could pick one potential first-round matchup to watch that will get you most engaged, what would that be?
That is a wonderful question, and I think to me that is the 3-6 matchup in the West between your Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets.
I couldn't agree more. I can't think of a more compelling matchup right now that I could point to. Knicks and Raptors, of course, if that does indeed happen, it'll be great to watch because of the Raptors being the Canadian entry. But the idea of the Wolves playing against the Nuggets, particularly with the Nuggets having been knocked out the last 2 seasons by the Wolves, that makes for a real interesting matchup. The Wolves have been a bit of a dog's breakfast this year. I mean, they have a winning record. They're still a very dangerous team. They're a very physical team. They're a bit banged up. Ant has been in and out of the lineup. When he's been in, at times he's very good, at times not so much. Their defense isn't quite at the level it's been at the last few years. They've brought in a couple of new players that have made nice contributions. And then Denver, if Watson is available and is healthy through the whole playoff, I think there's a real edge that you have to give to Denver with the way that they're playing in general. 12 in a row, is it 11 in a row or 12 in a row that the Nuggets have won? They're going into the playoffs with all the momentum in the world with, even though SGA will be the MVP, you and I were just talking off mic that we both believe that Jokic is still the best basketball player in the world.
Yeah. And the Nuggets are on an 11-game win streak. They can close it on a 12-game win streak tomorrow night against the San Antonio Spurs.
That will be interesting because that will be a challenge to their win streak, number one. But number two, it's also going to be interesting to see who actually plays in that game, how important that game is for the Nuggets to continue their win streak, or are they going to rest their stars? And the same with the Spurs. And quite honestly, there's been so much controversy this year, Josh, over load management and tanking. Deservedly so. Shame on the NBA. This has eroded the foundation of the game. Both of those circumstances. The tanking is an embarrassment, and load management is a joke. Now, having said that, the only time I think it's forgivable to not play your stars is right before the playoffs. Because a guy like Jokic, he plays a ton of minutes, and he will have to play a ton of minutes. So if you can give him a little extra rest, why not? So that'll be interesting to watch. Music coming on is from Worst Days Down. That was my son Ben's band. We are coming up on a very painful time for our family. It'll be 3 years since we lost Ben. The name of this song is David's Song, dedicated to his friend David Finkelman, who also lost his life, passed away from an errant driver. And I don't do this every week because I want anybody's pity. I do this because I want to remind everybody what Ben's life represented, which was to be kind to other people. We don't know what's going on in people's lives, so we should always think the best of each other and always find ways for random acts of kindness. So please, tell those that you love them. Tell them that you love them. If you can, if there is such a thing, tell them too much. Don't make the mistake of not telling them enough. Josh, it's been great to be back. Thank you very much, birthday boy.
It's been great to have you back, Paul. It's a pleasure working with you every Saturday.
Likewise, Josh. And have a great time, like I said, on your birthday. Enjoy the Flames game. And folks, enjoy all the action on the court this upcoming week. Stay safe. Hope you have a great week on and off the court. You've been listening to Hoop City with Paul Sir and Josh Fenwick on your sports leader, Sports 1440.